Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Open Wounds Podcast. I'm your host, Candace, and today we will be interviewing Elaine Harvey. Elaine Harvey is a certified pediatric sleep specialist, postpartum maternity nurse, and mother. She also has had her own personal life journey, which includes complex PTSD. So she is an excellent resource for us to learn about parenting through complex PTSD, which I know for a lot of us, the act of parenting and having children can bring up a lot of unresolved, unprocessed emotions and kind of create a very destabilizing environment for us, especially if the crying triggers us, which is something I experience, or feeling like you don't know exactly how to meet the child's needs in the way that you wish your needs were met. And we get into all of that today. Elaine has decades of experience. She's been working with families since 2001, and she's worked with over 20,000 families worldwide. Her website, that I'll link in the show notes, is a wealth of information regarding all the things regarding, newborns all the way up to older children. She has great tips for helping co-regulate with your child. We get into a lot of different stuff here. We probably could have talked for days about this. But her website is Lullababy SOS. So it's LULLABABY SOS. You can work with her regarding sleep consultations or other parenting challenges you're having. She has blogs and all kinds of really great resources for you to utilize. So thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Please share this with a mother or somebody who's postpartum. This is a really great resource for people who are struggling with that and learning how to regulate their emotions through parenting a newborn. And also, please subscribe. We're really trying to make sure that this is a resource people want and that people are actually listening to the podcast and enjoying the content we're producing. I really hope that this is beneficial to those who are accessing it, and please share it with those you think might enjoy this episode. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy this week's episode of Open Wounds Podcast with our guest, Elaine Harvey. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Open Wounds Podcast. This week, I have with me a guest. Her name is Elaine Harvey. She is a specialist in parenting and I believe sleep training. There's some other modalities she works with as far as helping parents deal with the difficulties they may face as they have children, raising them. And she also has some personal experience in parenting with complex PTSD. So I thought she would be a perfect guest for the podcast because she has real life experience in parenting through your own mental health challenges. And she's worked with tons of clients who I'm sure have run the gamut with their own challenges. So I know she has a wealth of knowledge to share with us today. So welcome, Elaine.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Candace. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for being here. So if you want to share with the listeners and the viewers a little bit about what brought you into parent coaching and teaching people how to, deal and manage with all the ups and downs that come with parenting, especially when you're dealing with a newborn and all the emotions and hormones and things that are happening during that time frame.
Yeah, so I'm originally Irish. I moved out to Australia. I've been here for best part of 22 years now. But basically, my background kind of started out as I did a lot of babysitting, things like that. When I was younger, I was very attracted to kids when I was younger. Like growing up in Ireland, there's lots of big families. I grew up in a large family. My dad is one of 11 children. There was a lot of kids around, and I used to just love hanging out and spending time with them. But when I kind of started adulting, I started working as a nanny in London. And essentially, I kind of came into this role because I didn't have a fantastic relationship with my own mother. It was tumultuous at the best of times. And I really wanted to make sure, even like at a very young age, that I wasn't going to be the mother that my mother was. And I remember when I started working as a nanny, I literally said to myself, if I can spend 2 years doing this and not raise my voice to the kids, that then I could actually consider being a mum myself, because I wholly considered that if I couldn't, I would consider not having children at all, even though I adore children. And it really sent me down the rabbit hole. So I'm also ADHD. My nickname as a kid was Jack in the Box and Scatterbrains. I was a very, very active, very hyperactive kid. But one of the things about being ADHD is that we can get hyper focused on things. And my hyper focus has been for all of my adult life, early childhood development, parent-child attachment, and just, how I just really dove into all of those areas. So when I was working as a nanny and things like that, I really just focused on, babies and kids and their sleeps and their routines. I ended up working as a maternity nurse for a couple of years, and essentially what that meant was, and any mother that's listening to this will really appreciate it, what we would do is when mum came home from hospital with baby, I would come into the home, do 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, care of mother and baby for the first 12 weeks of that baby's life. And in that time, essentially, it was about nourishing mum, supporting mum, and helping her structure a routine for their little one, helping develop some positive feeding and sleeping, and just get in the flow. So never really did I see it as a career. Even then, it was like, this is just something I love doing. I was like, this is the best job in the world. But I was going from new baby, 12 weeks, take a couple of days off, then new baby, 12 weeks. So a couple of years of that, I was exhausted. Absolutely.
24 hours a day, that's very intense. I mean, it's amazing for the mom who's getting that support and the baby to be able to bond and have someone there for them. But for you as an employee, as a job, that is hard. That's a really hard. That's, you have no life outside of this,
No, thankfully I lived in Europe, so it used to, I lived in London at the time, so it was like I knew my contracts, and I would jump on a plane and go somewhere in Europe for 5 days on my time off, and then it would all just start all over again. Yes, I was very, very exhausted. I
think it sounds also a bit like, normally as we progress as parents, at least for me, I would be like, oh, soon he's going to be sitting up. Soon he's going to start doing his army crawl. And you never got to really move along the little path with the parent, right? And the baby, you were like Groundhog's Day. And it's very, also for women, that cycle of moving into the next phase with the child and the child maturing and your body getting a break from the nursing or the sleepless nights. You really weren't ever even getting that for your own circadian rhythm and your own, your own mental health and all that.
No, but you know when people talk about the oxytocin when you're cuddling a newborn baby, or when you're cuddling babies, like nurturing these babies just filled my cup, just absolutely filled my cup. So it never, and it's still to this day, doesn't feel like work. I remember my dad used to say to me, something that people say, find something that you love and do it, make it a job, and you'll never work a day in your life. Yeah. And I am forever grateful that I feel like I've done that. And I feel like it really does fill my cup all of the time. But over the years, when I moved to Australia, like I said, I never felt this was a job. It was just a very, very natural thing. And when I moved to Australia and I started working in an a childcare centre, and they kind of looked at my resume and were like, baby's room, there you go. So at the time I had like 30 odd children on my rota in the week. So the ratios was like 8-2, so 2 staff members, 8 babies. And I'd gone from this beautiful quality care to all of a sudden having 8 babies to look after that can do nothing for themselves, but that they were rotating through the week. So you had different babies, different temperaments, different personalities. And I really struggled because I knew that they weren't getting what they needed, because we were juggling all of the time.
Yeah, it's too stretched too thin.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, how can I build their emotional cup and still make sure that they're meeting their needs, their sleep, their nutrition, and all of that sort of stuff. So very quickly, I kind of said to my parents, please let me just put your babies on my routine. Let me find a routine that works for this group. And all of my parents were really good about it. And very quickly, we had this fantastic routine, and all the kids were sleeping better. Some of them were sleeping better at home. The parents were coming in and they were like, wow, how did you do that?
Yeah.
I'm like, it's easy, I'll show you. And one of the mums came in and said, oh, we go to sleep school for that. And I was like, what is sleep school? And they're like, well, we go to the hospital and we do an in-service stay, and they teach the babies how to sleep. And I was like, what? Nah, you do that at home. And that is essentially where Lola Baby SOS started. So I kind of focused on teaching parents how to read their baby's cues, how to set up a routine that is age, sleep, nutritionally balanced for them, and how to support their little ones with their settling and the changes. Because, when I had a newborn baby, I didn't have problems to fix. I just set them up with the right foundations. So it was really easy. But then when I had a 9-month-old who's breastfeeding to sleep or co-sleeping and waking up several times, it's like their cries are different, their attachments are different. And back then it was like, it was just basically traditional sleep training, and that never sat well with me. So that was back in 2004 to 2007. So it was very much, I wanted to show parents how to support their little ones onto a routine and onto being able to fall asleep in their cots with support. And at the time, there was no such thing as video monitors for babies. Right. So I would come into the house and I would have these security cameras with massive amounts of cabling, and I'd come in and I'd be going, okay, where's your TV? because I would hook the security camera up into the bedroom and hook it up to the TV, because if I'm settling in a dark room, I want parents to be able to see exactly what's going on and see the nuances with the support, because it's like, don't just sit there and pat, pat, pat. It's about, I want to support you through your emotions, not pat you to sleep. And I don't want to put you in the cot and go, hey, suck it up and learn how to do this, and do like these arbitrary timings of like wait 10 minutes and then go in and settle, and then wait 20 minutes and go and settle. It was like, no, that's not fair. And everything's kind of evolved from there. But like over the last 20 years of doing this, parenting has changed so much. Like the whole space has changed so much. And yeah, it's parents are very, very overwhelmed and conflicted and confused with all the different advice and recommendations, and nobody wants to just sleep train their little ones, but it seems like the two ends of the spectrum. It's like, well, we've got to do like 100% attachment parenting or 100% control crying. There's no middle ground, and the truth is, going at one or the other side of the spectrum it never works. Like the sweet spot is in the middle, and finding that ground that works for you.
Yeah, there's so many questions and things coming up as you're talking about this journey that you've had. The first one is, because you did that cycle in London with those moms over and over again, I'm sure you got really intimately acquainted with that postpartum period and the emotions and the things. Like postpartum depression is not something that we talked about decades ago, but now it's very much on the radar. And so I'm sure you could see, number one, the mom and her own adjustment period and what her struggles were. And then also, like you said, babies just kind of usually arrive neutrally, but we do sometimes have that unusual baby who has colic or a tongue tie or some type of medical issue that's causing a digestive reflux. And so that's another thing too, that's kind of, I've seen through the internet, connecting people. They don't feel so alone, because they're like, with my second son, my first son was born when you were talking about in the early 2000s. So yes, that sleep training, put the baby on a schedule, was very popular back then. But then when my second son was born 12 years later, like you said, the parenting world had completely changed. And I was like, wait, we're not doing this anymore. Now we put them in carriers and now we do this. And he was so colicky, and the doctors really invalidated when I would go forward and I'd be like, he just won't stop crying. And now I'm dysregulated because the crying is a trigger for me, and I can't make him stop crying. Like, I would hold him and I would rock him and I'd bounce him, and I'd like, there was only a few little tricks, but like, which one of them was putting him like in water or the bath. But I'm like, we cannot stay in the bathtub all day long, like just to get him to stop crying, right? So if you want to talk a little bit about like what you saw and how you helped moms through those times, because I have friends that have really struggled in the postpartum period. Mine was actually during pregnancy. I had a massive depressive episode. So, but once he was born, like all those good oxytocin hormones started flowing, and I was like, okay, we can do this. But yeah, I know that you probably have a wealth of information for people dealing with postpartum and with colicky babies, or babies that just don't, go along with the flow, so to speak.
Having a baby who's got an underlying issue, like it is exhausting mentally, emotionally, physically. It's like, have you ever seen the movie Tully? If Mums, it's one of those movies that didn't really get posted a lot online, but I remember seeing it with a girlfriend. I went to the movies and watched it, and it's literally a movie about the effects of postpartum exhaustion and depletion. And we went to a matinee show, and once it finished, my girlfriend went to get up, and it took me about 30 minutes to leave the cinema because it hit me so hard. I was like snot crying, like convulsive crying, because it hit every single nerve, because it is overwhelming how exhausted you can be. Over the years, I used to do 3 or 4 overnight sessions a week, where I would go into the home. I would do 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and then I would do some daytime consultations along with it. But for me, I used to kind of go, I get to have sleep. I get to have sleep, say, 3 nights a week or 4 nights a week, even though I had like a young baby, a young daughter as well at the time. But my justification was I basically miss out on her sleep. So I'm not missing out on her day stuff. So I would go to work at night, and then I would spend the day with her. And just like mums, it's like I'm up all night, and then I'm still doing all the mothering and all the other stuff during the day, and then I'm up all night, and I say, okay, because I'm getting a couple of nights sleep myself. But I'm okay. But I had, when I'm there and I'm in this home with a parent and with a mum who's so vulnerable and is literally looking to me for guidance when they've only met me a couple of hours ago, and I'm having to protect her mental and emotional health and her baby's mental and emotional health. It's such a delicate thing to be given that. I don't want to say it's not control, but like for somebody to give me that trust and go, help me. That was huge for me, and it's one of the reasons I've never employed staff. I've never employed another sleep consultant or trained another sleep consultant, because for me, I always felt that going in that environment is you need to respect and protect that, and really deeply understand what's going on in that situation. And if you push a baby or a parent too far, that can have horrible effects on her view of her parenting. And the thing with my hyper focus as an ADHD person was I read the tiny nuances in situations, and the body language. So I think we discussed about having CPTSD, and being in a home that never felt truly safe. Is you learn to read people.
Yes.
Absolutely. You learn to read in between those lines. You learn to read the tone, the body language, the look. And from a very young age, that's something that I was hyper tuned into. And so being with parents overnight and being able to read and adjust their plans accordingly, and adjust my support for the parent in those situations, and my language that I'm using in those situations. And it's like we might get baby down to sleep, sit down and talk about everything with mom and dad, and then say, okay guys, go and get some sleep. And we'd try and get a little bit of sleep while baby was sleeping, but then as soon as baby woke up, he was like on. And I would have to turn that brain on. And I used to be like, okay, what do I need? And it was that hyper focus of making sure that I'm reading everything with that mum and that baby, so that I was supporting them in the right way in the night. And when I saw a mum see the results, see how the adjustments that they were making made such a big impact to her emotional health, her confidence in her parenting, that just gave me the energy. That no matter how exhausted I was, that gave me the energy to keep going and keep doing what I was doing, because I knew I was making a difference in that person's life. And I think that the first 2 years of parenting is such a confronting, it's such an amazing time in a parent's life, that the more that I can help them enjoy it and lean into it and feel more confident in their parenting of their child, then that is a really beautiful thing to be able to be part of. But the exhaustion is so real. It is like over the years, I've had lots of issues with my health from exhaustion. Like I remember I used to say that, oh, it's okay, I'll just have a nervous breakdown, I'll take some time off and I'll be fine. I literally used to think that a nervous breakdown would be, as they say it on the internet, it's like, you're just not going to be able to get out of bed. And I was waiting for that to happen. And it never happened. But I was losing some of my nervous system stuff happening. So I was doing fly-in, fly-outs to some people where I'd do 3 days in a row. And I'd gone to see this client in Canberra, and we had booked everything via text message. Like we'd booked flights, we'd booked the sessions in, we had to reschedule it because the baby was sick, and everything was done by text message. I had not spoken to this woman. I was about to spend 3 days in her home, and she had lots of allergies. Her son had lots of allergies and intolerances and a really sore digestive system. But the reason we were doing this by text message is because she was in a dark room with that baby for most of the time, and if she wasn't, he was crying. And 24 hours into the session, I had completely lost my hearing, like stone deaf in one of my ears, and it just went like that. And it was like, oh my God, I cannot hear. So I ended up in emergency, and long story short, that happened to me another 3 times over the next, say, 6 months, and they would put me on high dose of steroids to get my hearing to come back. And because it was over a long period of time, I just saw it as that singular thing. And then one day I was sitting down watching TV with my husband, and I burnt my arm. I burnt my arm, and I had this burn on my arm. And my husband was like, what happened to your arm? And I literally had this big burn on my arm that I could see, but I didn't feel it. I could pinch around it. When you get this tiny burn on your finger, how painful it is.
Yeah.
I had this big burn across my arm that I didn't feel. But I could feel my arm around it. So I went back to my doctor, and I was like, hey, I got this burn. I didn't feel it. What's going on? And she asked me how my sight was going. And I was like, well, I get blurred vision going around long sweeping bends. So I used to know that there were particular bends on roads that I would just get blurred vision. And I used to just hug the
lines.
Yeah, exactly. And she said to me, Elaine, there's only one thing that can do this, and that's MS. So we're going to send you for brain scans. So I went and had brain scans because essentially we kind of put all these things together. I was losing my hearing. I used to get itchy arms for no reason, where I would literally have to put ice packs on my arms. There was no reason, there was no lumps or blisters, but I would just get this intense fire burning in my arms. Couldn't see, and then I was having that nerve issue. And the results of it were that I was so exhausted that I wasn't, and I just kept going and going and going, that my nervous system was breaking down on me. And I, parents are going through this all the time. They are going through broken night's sleep every night. They're co-sleeping with their babies and co-sleeping, but there's nothing wrong with co-sleeping. If co-sleeping works for you, fantastic. But when you're doing it as survival and you're not really sleeping because you're afraid of rolling over on your baby, and you're getting constant broken sleep, and if you've got a baby and a toddler, and you're having to do all the doing all of the time, then the effect that that's having on you and your body is, it happens so slowly that you don't see it.
You don't realize it.
Yeah. And I look at parents and they're going, "Oh, I have to let my husband sleep because he's got to work tomorrow." And I go, "But what about you? What about the effects of sleep deprivation and how that affects you driving?" Do you feel like if you have less than 2 hours sleep in a night, then your driving skills are equivalent to being over the limit in alcohol? Yet you're driving your kids around. Would you let your kids go into a car with somebody who you knew was over the limit drinking? No. You're probably driving your kids around, not realizing how you're not how you're not driving as good as you should. Like, I used to have my logo, my phone number on my car, and I found it difficult to drive at nighttime from tiredness, but I was able to drive fine during the morning. So when I was driving home from a client, I got a phone call on my phone, and it was a lady behind me, and she said, "Hey, I can just see your logo on the back of your car, and I'm calling you because you are swerving all over the road."
Oh, wow.
I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, I know from your logo you're probably tired and you're probably not realizing it." And literally, I thought I was driving perfect, but she was so concerned that she called me. So I pulled over and got myself together, and I was like, "Wow, yeah, I thought it was
we
fine."
don't even realize how big of a toll it's taking on us. I know just from friends and myself, when my son was we were co-sleeping out of survival, as you said. It wasn't because I wanted him in the bed with me or I wanted to be an attachment parent, but if he was put down and he wasn't touching me, he was screaming. And so he would sleep, but this was about 9 months old. He was waking up every hour on the hour and nursing for like 2 minutes and then like falling asleep again. And then we would do this cycle. So I was getting like no sleep because by the time he settles and I fall back asleep, he's gonna walk up again. And so, it was one of those things where I was like, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Like, I was like, I want to, and then depression can set in because you're so like, I can't function. I can't think. I feel stressed. I want to cry. I don't want to be alive. I don't want to live like this anymore. And so I think it's very common for parents to think I'm doing something wrong or I'm a flawed human and I should be able to do this. I should be able to get through this because mothers have done this for generations, but they don't realize we used to live in villages in pods where we had aunts and grandmas and neighbors who we could be like, "Please take baby so I can take a 4-hour nap and get at least one REM cycle," right? And then also, I think that whole thing with the attachment parenting, we've kind of swung so far that moms are so afraid of just letting someone take the baby for 4 or 5 hours. They can't trust that
if I let my cousin or my neighbor or my friend come over and watch them the whole time. I've heard a couple of people say this to me, like they'll leave, but the whole time they're gone, all they're doing is worrying and worrying about their baby. So they're not able to even relax and enjoy and rest during that time because they're so anxious about their attachment and the safety of their child. So I don't know if you have tips or things that you've worked with parents in this scenario that we're living through right now, because I think it is, like you said, a different time for parents. Cry it out was very common back when my parents were growing up and
Yeah.
and even when I was a child. I had one lady I worked with who came back to work and the baby was only like 3 weeks old. And I said, "Oh, aren't you so tired?" She goes, "No, I just put her in the crib and let her cry and she falls asleep." And I was like, "Oh my God, she needs to be eating." Like I think there's like part of it, we were too far this way, like you said, and now we're kind of too far into the attachment parenting where our own health and mental well-being as adults is suffering because we think we need to be like glued to the child 24/7 and that we're going to cause some irreparable psychological damage to them if we let somebody else step in and caretake for us so that we can sleep or we can shower or we can eat a full meal.
This is going to be a super long answer. Okay, because there's so much unpacking in that. It is, you fear the nights, you pray for the day to come, like you've been up so much overnight, and then the sun comes up and you go, okay, start another day, but you feel like somebody's throwing sandpaper in your eyeballs, and you're like, how am I going to survive today? Yes, this whole thing about attachment, and we've been doing it for generations. We used to live in these villages where mums all supported each other, and there would be like women would breastfeed anyone, not just their child, they breastfeed any of the kids that needed breastfeeding. And then we also look at like tribes, and they talk about how tribes do all these things, and it was like they held boundaries as well. Like if you look at it's like, no, my 4-year-old is there chopping vegetables and contributing in the community, not that I'm doing everything for that child.
Yes.
Which is where we've gotten to here. But there's this thing that when you are co-sleeping, to co-regulate with your little one. It's like, yes, co-regulation, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to have our little ones co-regulate. That's normal. Yes, it is. But what happens is when we co-regulate from a place of fear, from a place of anxiety in our own selves, of us not doing something right, then what's happening is that becomes a negative effect. Because when we talk about co-regulation, we want to help our babies and our children learn how to do things in a developmentally and emotionally appropriate way. Okay, so when most babies are under 4 months of age, parents, I said, they're a little bit smug. The newborns sleep to make you a little bit smug, unless you've got colic or reflux or a medical issue that's affecting their nutrition. Most newborns will sleep and wake for a need. And what happens is they might get to around 10, 12 weeks of age, and they might be only waking up twice a night. And parents are like, yay, look at us, we're doing a great job. What's all this stuff about sleep training and stuff? But they may be feeding to sleep or rocking to sleep or bouncing to sleep. And essentially what happens is babies learn what we do most often. Like they learn what we teach, and what we do most often becomes most familiar. And at around that 4 months, when their circadian rhythm regulates into a more permanent pattern, they start to do sleep cycles that are typically long block of about 3 hours, then 2 hours, then 2 hours, then every hour thereafter. Okay, so if you're putting your baby down to bed at 7 o'clock at night, the likelihood is they'll hit a REM sleep cycle at 10, then 12, then 2, then 3, 4, 5, and 6. And if every time that they hit that REM sleep cycle, you respond to it with putting a boob in the mouth, then they start to associate feeding with sleeping. And that the only way that I can link a sleep cycle is through popping that boob in my mouth. I'm not hungry, but that's how I fall back to sleep. And REM sleep cycle is that light active sleep phase. And if we have this external association with that, then they're not getting the full benefit of the REM sleep cycle, of the brain development that it's supposed to be doing, because they're focusing on this external association. So then they become, they kind of become a little bit more anxious. It's like, where is it? And it's like before they even start to wake up, they start sucking. And they start, and then you put them on the boob, and then they start sucking, and you go, oh, maybe they're hungry. So they feed and they go back to sleep, but then they don't feed well. So then they wake up again. And what ends up happening is you're exhausted. You start being reactive responsive. You start feeling anxious and stressed. And baby has that same knock-on effect. They're exhausted. They're not getting the sleep and the rest that they need. Their brain is not getting the enough of that REM sleep cycle. So what happens is they start to need more of it, and they start to focus on that that external association more. So we get into a vicious cycle of co-regulating through fear and anxious attachment. And you get depleted. Baby's emotional regulator becomes external. And what I've seen over the last couple of years, over the last 20 years, is this increase of kids that are going to school, that are going to high school, that haven't learned these emotional regulation skills. So their emotional regulator has always been external, so that when they're going into environments where they don't have mummy to regulate them, then they find that they're having more challenges socially, emotionally, in school. And then we're finding that we've got these really anxious teenagers and school age kids who are really struggling in so many different areas because they haven't learned how to emotionally regulate themselves. So what I love to help parents understand is that difference between co-regulation from fear and co-regulation with confidence, that we absolutely want to support our child in learning something new. But what we want to focus on with that is, I want to support you through your emotions. I want to hold space for your emotions while you're learning something new, not control the situation so you don't have to feel the feels. Because we want to help our kids grow to be healthy, happy, confident, thriving kids. And when parents understand the nuances and the differences and feel more confident with, hey, I can support my kid through emotional regulation and do it in a healthy way, mum becomes more confident in her parenting. Mum and dad feel like they're on the same page, feel like they're part of a team. Like, I make sure that both parents are equally part of the parenting, because there is nothing that a father can't do except for breastfeed. And when a mum feels like it's like when parents have babies, they both start at the starting block at the same kind of level. But very quickly, mum starts racing off and dad gets left behind, and then mum feels like she's out here on her own, that, oh, just give it to me, it's easier for, I'll just it's quicker. And dad feels like, I can't do anything right. So everybody's suffering because they're just not getting the right support, the right information to say, hey, you have got everything that you need within you. It's just that we need to have more consistency in how we teach our parents. And there's so much that's like, you're doing it wrong. If you do this type of parenting, you're doing it wrong. If you do purees, then you're doing it wrong from the like baby led reading. Oh my goodness, you're feeding your baby this and you're putting these clothes on and you're not getting, like, everything feels like it's a judgment.
Yeah.
And feels like I can never get it right. But and that's yeah.
Yeah, that touches on something that I think, especially parents who have complex PTSD or their own childhood traumas, is we knew as it was happening to us as a kid that this was not right. Like, we're like, I really wish my mom wouldn't scream at me, or I really wish my dad wouldn't throw things across the room when my brother cries, right? Like, we got that we didn't want to replicate what we had. So then it's like we become almost hyper vigilant in our own parenting of like, well, I don't want to fuck it up. I don't want to do these things wrong, but what do I do? Like, I don't do this, right? Like, we're going to like push out everything we learned in our own childhood, so to speak. And usually we often toss anything that was good as well, because we're like, we don't want to replicate that. So then we like come over here and we're like, well, this lady says, this book says to do this, and then this expert says to do this, and this podcast says to do this. And like you said, there's so much conflicting information and judgment, and we're already in a state of like not feeling like we had a good foundation, right? It's much different if you grew up with a parent with, secure attachment, and yes, there's some bumps in the road, but for the most part, you felt loved and nurtured by your parent. And then you can just build from that in your own way. Right. But when you feel like you have no roadmap and it becomes this like fumbling in the dark in this place, you said, of fear and anxiety of like, I don't want to mess up my child and I want to give them a better life than I had, but I'm also dysregulated and I don't know how to regulate my own emotions when their emotions, we start to, like you said, mirror each other in this like negative feedback loop. And I think most parents are like, I don't know how to get out of this. Like, now that I've gotten stuck in this little weird cycle, and it can happen quickly. Like you said, well, if the kid at 4 months isn't, they're in a poor sleep cycle, about 6 weeks later, the mom can feel like, I don't know what to do. Everything is off the rails.
Yeah. When I didn't know that I had CPTSD for a long time. I knew that I didn't have a great upbringing. I knew that there was some abandonment issues, but I felt like I'd always worked. Like it was my hyper focus. I worked on making sure that I knew everything and educated myself as much as I could. But when I fell pregnant with my daughter, I never saw myself as a mother of a girl. And I remember having to go and have some therapy because I was so scared of having a daughter. I was like, I don't know how to do daughters because my relationship was so volatile. I really got into that dysregulation. Like I just really struggled with it. And with the help of my therapist, it was like, no, you're good. Because look at all this work and education and self-learning that you've done to help yourself with this. You've actually put all the work in, and that gave me the confidence to do it. But then for me, where I've struggled the most is when my daughter became a teenager. Because that was the hardest part of my life. That was where I suffered the most. That is where I had suicidal attempts. That's where it was hard. So when my daughter started hitting that age, my fear of any kind of raised voices, any kind of words that affected me, um, I was constantly triggered for fear of how that was going to impact her, and trying to recognize that this is my attachment and this is my version, not her version.
Yeah.
Like when there were raised voices or when there was difficult situations, it was like my reaction came from my fear of how she was going to react to it because of the upbringing that I had. But her reaction was completely different because she had the solid foundation.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like any point where you've had difficulty in your upbringing that you found that you've struggled with, it's really about working on what's really going on in your head, and unpacking that so that you're not bringing those emotions into this situation that's completely different.
Yes.
And at every point, I think in parenting, there's going to be challenges. Sometimes it is a case of like sitting down and looking at the looking at the situation for yourself and looking at the parent that you want to be, and literally just sitting with it, maybe journaling. I think that even like bullet points and like in a diary or voice memos in a diary and things like that can really help you unpack and where you're feeling the most dysregulated in your parenting. I think you need to sit with it, have conversations with your partner, unpack it, help your partner to help you process. Like if they know that you're struggling with this particular aspect of your parenting, and this is some of the possible reasons why, then they can really support you better in that rather than being frustrated with you. Getting some, professional help, breath work. Like the amount of mums I talk about doing grounding breaths and parasympathetic breathing, the amount of mums that just cannot do a parasympathetic breath because they're in that fight flight and they're breathing into their chest and everything's cortisol. But even when I'm trying to help them do a belly breath, it's like I'm actually feel like I'm hyperventilating. It's like, yes, because you're breathing into your chest, not your tummy. So practicing breath work, practicing deep breathing when you're feeling anxious is one of the biggest tools that can really help a parent. And I would always say, at the traffic lights, when the kettle's boiling, when you're making a coffee, when you're sitting on the toilet, when you're in the shower, when you're blow drying your hair, take that time to just focus on your breathing and focus on maybe doing 3 or 5 deep breaths, like long inhale or deep inhales, long exhales. And even if you can get 3 or 4 of them, because when you practice it, when you don't need it, then you're able to bring it back, bring it in.
You're like doing the preparation work ahead of time before the stress comes, which I think so many of us wait until the stress is already here. And then we're trying to like breathe while the baby's like screaming and it's not a good situation. But yeah, that's so key to practice before you get into the heat of the moment. And then I also loved how you talked about like a lot of what's happening with our own childhood wounds and our child, we can often become stuck in this pattern of projecting our own stuff onto the kid. And I realized that with my second son because his personality is so completely different than my older son. It was like a whole new ball game parenting him, but I was projecting my own like fear of abandonment or fear of not being heard or feeling like I was being ignored. And so I was almost overdoing it with him where I was letting him talk my ear off for hours and hours and hours and just absorb all my attention because I wanted him to feel heard. And then I was like working with it with my therapist, and she was like, he's not you. He hasn't had that experience where there was 4 other kids in the family and he was being ignored and no one ever listened to him and no one ever validated him. So you don't have to do this. You guys have just got stuck in this cycle where he just talks and talks and talks because that's his way of getting attention, right? So we had to change the dynamic with he and I to where I didn't project my own stuff onto him. And then he also had a way to be boundaried, right? Like, I think that's the other thing, is letting him be boundaried so that he knows there are limits to how I interact with my mom or my teacher or things like that. And so I think those are all really good points. Like you said, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves and preparing ourselves to be stable and grounded, because as soon as we move into that, destabilized state, it's so much harder to do the parenting that we have to do on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it's like a couple of things you said, boundaries. I will always say to my parents, like, it is your job as a parent to hold boundaries that represent safety, love, and reassurance. It's your kid's job to kick the living daylights out of those boundaries.
Yeah.
And push and push and push and push, because they want to push you, and they want to push it so bloody hard because they want to go, you got me, right? I can push this and you got me. And you can hold those boundaries. But when they push and you are flexible, and they push and you flex, and they push and you flex, everybody feels dysregulated. They're like, man, give me something to like lean against. They're like, I'm going to push and push and push you. And it's the classic, like, toddler. You put them down to bed, they're all ready for bed, and they're like, oh, I'm hungry, I don't like this sock, I want these socks on, take these off, I want this blanket, I want to go on the toilet, I don't like this, I want mummy, I want daddy, I want 6 books, I'm not tired, I want to sleep in your bed. And they just push and push and push. And parents are like, excuse after excuse, or regulating. It's okay, no, you're not hungry, and we do this, and we talk them down, and we give them, and like 3 hours later, everybody's just frustrated. Whereas it's like, hang on, okay, I'm gonna put a bedtime routine in place. I'm going to make sure that in this bedtime routine that you've had your emotional cup filled. We have consistency and repetition in how we do this. You're ready for bed. You're not hungry. Daddy's going to put you to bed tonight, and the mum is going to put you to bed tomorrow night. And when they go, no, I don't, you go, no, baby, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
You don't have to like it, but this is what we're doing. And when you hold those boundaries and they push against them, then they go, you got me. I can be overwhelmed and frustrated and throw tantrums, but I know that you know how to handle me. Yeah. And often it's like, man, get used to holding boundaries with a toddler, because if you don't get used to it and get comfortable in that now, you're in so much trouble when your kid is a teenager. So, learning how to hold boundaries with confidence with your kid then is super important. So there was the boundaries thing that you were talking about.
And I think that, like you're saying, the consistency too, because what I found myself in is I was okay holding the boundary when I was regulated and I was stable. But when I'm starting to become dysregulated and reach my breaking point and I'm exhausted, then suddenly I snap and I either overcorrect and I'm like, that's enough, we're not even talking anymore, don't speak to me. Or
and then the guilt.
Yeah. Or I cave and I let them have what they want because I'm too tired to deal with it, right? So that's part of the boundaries too, is the boundaries need to be consistent and great and stable, so that way one day the boundary isn't here, the next day it's here, right? Like, because I think that's another part of us making sure we're taking care of ourselves so that we can be consistent for them.
And allowing yourself to make mistakes, allowing yourself to not get it right, and recognizing this is practice, not perfection. I'm not supposed to know everything as a mom. This is my apprenticeship. I'm not supposed to know everything. I'm new to this. And it's going to take my kid's whole lifetime to actually feel like I got this stuff. So stop beating yourself up when it's not perfect. Stop beating yourself up when you go, here, you're having cereal for breakfast or for dinner. Be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
I think one of the hardest things as well about when you've got trauma background is not even recognizing that your reaction is a trauma reaction.
Yeah.
Because you haven't fully unpacked your own trauma. And it might not be for years later that you start to unpack it. It's like, for me, like, I knew that my childhood was horrible. I had my ways of coping when I was younger. I had my ways of coping the whole way through my life. But when the diagnosis came for CPTSD, I was like, no, like, I don't have PTSD. I don't have these huge reactions to situations. I don't go into a panic state or anything like that. My thing was starting to recognize how I felt internally, the emotion, because that is how I react with my CPTSD. It's an emotional, it's a physical way that I hold my body, or that I feel inside. That literally, it's that gut wrenching feeling. But because it was so prolonged, because it was the whole way through it, it was a feeling that was so constant that I didn't recognize that it was not normal.
Yeah. I think that's so common. I mean, I identify with the same thing. I was like, I don't have PTSD. I don't have flashbacks. I don't have disassociation where you're blacking out and you don't remember things. So I think, there's so much, when we're processing what happened to us in our childhood and how we're managing and getting through it on a daily basis, it's not going to look textbook for most of us, because we've, like you said, it was always there since, as long as our memories have been founded. It wasn't like we were okay, and then there's a horrible event, and then okay. It was just always horrible event, as compounding on each other. So like you said, the emotional stuff, I didn't realize that holding my breath all the time and being hyper vigilant and scanning everybody in the room for their emotional state wasn't normal. I thought that that's how humans existed, right? And so once people are like, what? You saw that, and which, I mean, it can become, like you said, if you can harness it and use it, it can be a very powerful tool in working, with other people, but it can also become unhinged, and where it's becoming a barrier in your life, especially with parents, when you're dealing with your kid and you're trying to constantly see every single little inflection and emotional state, especially like you said, those toddler years where they're happy and then 5 minutes later they're crying and screaming, and then 10 minutes later they're asleep, and you're like, what the heck did I just experience with them? So yeah, I think, I completely identify with that. The complex PTSD will look different for everybody, and how they're managing it and how they're experiencing it in their life.
Yeah. And then throw ADHD on there as well, and rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria in there. And when you've got your child who you want them to love you more than anything else in the world, and they're
yeah.
And then the hyper focus of, how do I fix it?
Yeah.
How do I make this better? It's exhausting. It's really, really exhausting. yeah, I think I'm lucky because of the job. So it's like I get to unpack constantly. But if I had a different job and I was trying to figure this stuff out without the focus that I have and the availability to be able to research and unpack and dive deep in, yeah, it's just it's ongoing. And I think as well, it's 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 a lifelong thing as well.
Yes.
You never fix it. Like I know that I've had this recent situation where I was so devastated because I felt like I've done the work, I've unpacked everything, I've done all of that, I'm cured, and I've got this, and then something else hits, and you go, Edith, like I was so angry because I was like, it affects every part of your life because of that, and it's that whole generational trauma that you are the one that is breaking the cycle. But when you're 45 years old and you're still feeling the effects of that, that made me really angry. And there's times where, actually, every emotion, there's times where you sit in sadness, there's times where you sit in anger and frustration, and there's times where you forgive, you hold that forgiveness, and then cycle back through it all over again. It's just, and that's why one of the things that I've focused on a lot over the last couple of years is that we manifest what we focus on. And it's kind of my mantra now in life is that if I feel like I'm becoming dysregulated, I check myself and I go, you know what, get out into nature and then think about what is it that you're focusing on.
Yeah.
And let's
Absolutely.
change it.
Redirect
Because,
it. Yeah. Yeah. I totally identify with that. It's so funny because just recently an issue happened with um my husband's adult daughter, and I'll just say she eloped. I don't think she's ever going to listen to this podcast. If she does find it, good. I hope she can get something out of it. But she eloped, and it was suddenly bringing up all of these emotions in me. And I was like, this doesn't make sense why I'm feeling so emotionally dysregulated about my 30 some odd year old stepdaughter eloping. I'm very happy for her. He's a great guy. I know they'll have a great, wonderful marriage together. It wasn't anything about that. I was just like suddenly very emotional about this situation. And I did some tapping and I sat with it and I realized, oh, this isn't about her at all. This situation is mirroring my own relationship with my father and how our connection or lack of connection exists and all these things, right? It was bringing up all this stuff in me. And I was like, I thought I was done with this. I thought I processed this. And then you get mad because you think that you've completed or healed that section. And then again, another layer comes up. And so you're so right. It is a lifelong process. And as our children mature and go through these different stages of, even all the way into adulthood when they're no longer living with us and we don't have, a day-to-day interaction with them, there's still going to be things that are going to come up that are going to reflect back in us, the challenges of parenting and our own healing, right? It's all just kind of bouncing back and forth between them. So I totally understand what you're saying, where it's like, oh, I wish I didn't have to feel these feelings all over again or this emotion come back up. But I think that's just part of our journey in doing this work of healing the generational trauma and being self-aware, because, the only other option is to not and to check out and not heal ourselves. And so I'd rather be doing
on to
this
the
work.
next generation.
Right. I'd rather be stopping it and at least trying to change course for my own kids. But I know we're out of time, so I want to respect your time. It's been so great talking with you. I feel like we could talk for days about this topic. There's so much to dive into here. Do you want to share with the listeners if they're wanting to reach out to you for help with sleep training or co-regulation or any of these parenting skills that you offer? Would you like to share how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so one thing I always say is I don't sleep train. We do
Okay.
not, we do not sleep train. I help you create a routine that works for your family and
Nice.
have confidence in your parenting so that your whole family can thrive, not survive. Yes, a byproduct of that is your routine is better, your nutrition is better, and your sleep is better. Okay, so parents can reach out to me, lullababysos.com.au, or you can reach out to me on Instagram, which is lullababys. I have a variety of different sessions that we can book in. There's heaps of free resources on the website. And yeah, just reach out, say good day, and we can go from there.
Perfect. And I will put all your links to your website and your Instagram in the show notes so that people have that easily access. And I just so appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing about your own journey with parenting and helping people realize they're not alone and that this is, something we all go through as we heal ourselves and parent, which can be, very enlightening to see the areas that we still have to grow in. But thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time and have a great week, everybody. Thanks for listening.